Alright, so something I've always thought HSR is kind of lacking is a way for you to make your characters stand out, I guess. And what I mean by that is that there's basically no way to make them feel special, right? Like, assume you know nothing about me and my profile picture isn't Jingliu. If I showed you a list of characters on my account, would you be able to tell me which one of these are my favorites? The answer to that is probably no, because looking at this list, there's basically nothing you can tell from it other than the fact that, I've got the characters. As another example, if both you and I's favorite character is Jingliu, realistically, if you take a look at your Jingliu versus mine, they'll be pretty similar to each other. I mean, sure, I might have gotten relics that rolled slightly better than yours did, but on the other hand, maybe you've got planers that rolled better than mine did. But all in all, it's still the same character. Like, it's still Jingliu. You still play her in the same teams, and assuming that there's no skill issue involved, one Jingliu's clear should be roughly the same as the next. As a result of this, the gameplay can sometimes feel a little bit stale to look at and also play. I mean, there's nothing particularly cool about looking at someone else get a clear with a character when you could do that exact same clear yourself, right? So, I started thinking about what could be done to make our characters actually feel unique from each other, and I figured it'd be a neat thought experiment to discuss how something like this could be properly implemented and what it might bring to the table for a game like HSR. Right now, I feel there's actually a few reasons that characters don't really feel all that different from each other, and a large part of the issue stems from the systems that we currently have available to actually gear our characters with. In very simple terms, when you're building a character, you basically only have two choices: what relic set do they use, and then what light cone do you put on them. In my opinion, this results in there not being a whole lot of individuality that you can give your characters, because if the toughest decision that you have to make when building them is whether you put them on their signature relic set specifically designed for them, or, you throw them on a win set, then that doesn't exactly lead to a whole lot of depth or uniqueness between one character and the next. On top of that, relics aren't exactly the most enticing thing for people to invest their time in, because at the end of the day, it's all just RNG.
Let's go gambling! Aw, dang it.
And it doesn't have a tangible end. Like, when I level up a trace to max, I see 10 out of 10 and I'm like, alright, I've done my job here, and it was my choice to actually invest in maxing that character out. But with relics, you could spend months upon months working on a character only to have it be worse than someone who spent a week doing the exact same thing you did. And that's not even mentioning that builds never really feel complete. Like, you can look at a build with 100 crit rate and still have a lot to work on if you actually want to make it a good build, whether that's because you're missing a lot of attack or because you have no crit damage to pair with it. Most of the time, this results in a pretty frustrating experience. I mean, you never know when you'll get the god roll piece that you want, because it could be the next domain you do, or it might just never come. As a result, it always ends up feeling like you're chasing something, and while that's obviously intended because it's a gacha game, I feel that having more things in the game that actually do have that tangible end for players to work towards would be great. Not everything needs to be a wild goose chase in these games, but sometimes it feels like that's all you're really doing when you spend stamina in a relic domain. And to be clear here, I'm not exactly saying the idea of collecting RNG gear is bad. I mean, some people actually enjoy having a chase goal, like getting the perfect relic set. But I don't think that relics specifically give characters enough individuality for it to actually be meaningful. Like, let's be honest for a moment here, one character with 250 crit damage and another with 230 crit damage ends up with functionally no difference in the grand scheme of things. And it's not like 20 more crit damage is something you can really show off and be super happy about. So, I would like things to be added that actually do end up making that difference, but aren't RNG based, and ideally it would be something that comes with a choice alongside it, so that one player has the opportunity to do something different from the next. Overall, what I'm really looking for here is twofold. For one, I think there needs to be more things in the game that give players a choice, and I also think there needs to be a way for players to have moments where they can really have something that feels unique to them. At least in my opinion, it would be really cool if you could be known as the guy that has some really unique Fei Zhao build, or a super cool Himiko setup. But right now at least, I feel that diversity from one player to another isn't really there, so something like that just isn't possible. Personally, I think a great place to start would be adding in systems that act as a means for a character build on your account to be different from one on, say, my account. There's a few ways that something like this could be implemented, but I think to start the easiest way would be creating a scenario where the player has to choose between option A or B for one character, for example in something like a trace tree. Here's a hypothetical example. Let's say you fully max a character, like they're level 80, all their skills are maxed, both their major and minor traces are fully unlocked, the whole works. Imagine if after that, some cool animation plays and your trace tree all of a sudden expands. Now you're no longer looking at just your major and minor traces, you're looking at, I don't know, let's say supreme traces. These supreme traces could all do unique things, like say for Himiko, one trace could take you down a route that enhances their follow-up attacks, but another one could take you down a path where she turns into a real super break DPS. In my opinion, what would make this super interesting is if there was multiple options, but each player could only ever pick one supreme trace for their character. In my opinion, this would open up the game in a pretty large variety of ways. Obviously, it would let people have different builds in a broad sense, because right, like one character that currently sucks against a boss could spec into a build that makes them more usable against it, or they could turn into a unit that's better suited for a different mode like MOC instead of pure fiction. But it would also affect the game on a more micro level, like down to how you balance stats on a character, or it could give you different options to choose from when you're looking at relic sets and light cones, or it could even change the team that character may want to be played in. I will say there are some downsides to that, I guess, because if you pick a route that requires a new team, then obviously that would mean you need to roll for and get those new characters, but it was your choice to go down that route. So if you don't want to get those other characters, then there would be other supreme traces to pick from that better suit what you actually want to go for. And that's actually something else that's pretty neat to think about in my opinion. Right now, generally I would say most accounts have a game mode that they're really strong in and some that they're weaker in. For example, one of my friends got a lot of erudition characters, so he has a ton of fun in pure fiction, but has a much worse time in other modes like MOC and APOC. If a system like this were added, it could even open up the opportunity for my friend to potentially turn his erudition units into ones that may work better in other modes apart from pure fiction. Like, what if his Jingwan's Lightning Lord focused all of its attacks onto one singular enemy, or what if Jade was turned into even more of a support by offering, say, weakness efficiency to whoever she uses her skill on. There's a ton of ways that unique things could be designed with a system like this, and all of these things could potentially give new avenues for people to play their favorite characters, and more importantly, it could just give some nuance to the game. Right now, the game is a really cookie cutter. Like, the HP guy will always go with the HP team, and the attack guy will always go with the attack team.
That's right, the square hole.
While having these new builds won't necessarily change that fundamentally, it would offer some diversity in how individual characters may play between one account and another. At least personally, I would find something like this really interesting, but I do have to say, on the other hand, I can see a world where someone might not like this because it can take away from the identity of a character. Remember though, this is all just a thought experiment, so in a hypothetical world where this all happened, there's no real reason that these supreme traces, or whatever they're called, wouldn't be able to enhance the identity of a character instead of changing it. Basically, it would all just depend on how it ends up being implemented into the game. With all that said, one other thing we can talk about is something HSR's sister game Genshin Impact announced recently. At their 6.0 livestream, they said that they're going to let players increase their character's level to 100 after 5 years of being stuck at level 90. Granted, the requirements to do so are literally insane. I mean, you need to get an 8th copy of the 5-star character to get them to level 95 and a 10th for level 100, but regardless, the ability to level characters beyond their cap is really interesting to me. See, that kind of rare leveling system isn't actually new. There are some older gachas that have done it in the past as well. For example, one of my favorites, FGO, has a system where you can give your units holy grails that you collect through story content and events to increase their level up to 100. But you can only go past level 100 if you have multiple copies of the unit. So seeing something like that in another game wasn't exactly surprising to me, but I also never expected Hoyo to be the ones to offer something like this, because I mean, it's been 5 years, why would they? That said, with the introduction of the system, I do think it's worth noting that if it didn't have such insane requirements to, interact with it, something like this could be another means for one character to be more special than the next. Like for the list of characters I gave you at the beginning of this video, if every character on that list is level 80 or below, but my Jing Liu is level 90, it would be pretty obvious to see which one I like the most. Obviously, it would be great if the system didn't require you to get tons of copies of a character just to interact with it, so really, what I wish Hoyo did with Genshin and what I hope they do with a system like this if it's ever introduced into HSR, would be offer a means for people without those extra copies to actually participate in it. Like, it would be pretty easy for them to make, say, levels 80 to 90 attainable for free, albeit rare, and then levels 90 to 100 would be for those that spend more. This would basically keep everyone in the loop and also not exclude any players from content just because they didn't swipe for it, and at least personally, I can only consider that a good thing. On the other hand though, there's definitely a little bit of a reason to be concerned if something like this were added, because not every character is created equal, and that's only further exemplified by looking at the different types of damage. For example, a break-focused character gets a pretty large increase in damage strictly from their level increasing. It's almost like a transformative reaction from Genshin for those of you familiar with that. On the other hand, most of what a crit-based character will get is just raw base stats, because their damage formula doesn't really take level into account as much. So what that leaves us with is break characters getting a massive buff from a system like this, whereas regular crit-based characters end up with very small improvements. Or in simpler terms, if you boost up your Firefly and I boost up my Himiko, there's going to be a pretty big difference in the relative performance increase between the two of them. On top of that, if a system like this were implemented in a manner where everyone had access to it, the content of the game could be scaled up to match those new levels, but not every character in the game would be functioning on the same level because the damage increase they would get would be different depending on the type of damage that they actually do. And that is something that could definitely be pretty concerning, because it would essentially force players to invest in those transformative damage types, but on the other hand, that would only be necessary if the game was actually scaled up to match the new level tier, rather than keeping it as it is now. With all that said though, in an ideal world, Hoyo could actually have their cake and eat it too with this kind of system. As I mentioned earlier, something FGO does is allow everyone to increase the level cap of their units with an item called the Holy Grail. But it's only up to a certain point, after which you need more than one copy to go any higher. Despite that, everyone gets the exact same amount of Holy Grails, therefore even though a whale could push their favorite unit to the highest level possible, like level 120, the average player could increase multiple units to level 100, and the overall strength of accounts ends up evening out in the end. In my opinion, doing something similar to this would honestly fit in really well with how Hoyo runs their games, because they already give out items similar to this through their events and story, like Crowns in Genshin or Tracks of Destiny in HSR, and it wouldn't really be that hard to add in a level cap item as well. Regardless of what route Hoyo takes, personally I do think that there needs to be something added to the game that gives the player the feeling of a character really being special. It could be adding a means to customize your character like I talked about with Supreme Traces. It could be letting players increase the level cap of their favorite units like FGO does. Or it could even be adding some sort of attainable cosmetic for your character like a weapon skin or something like that. I mean hell, even Genshin has name cards that you can collect for your profile, which is a really simple implementation, but it does work, at least somewhat. It really does feel like there's just something missing in terms of being able to really show off a character as your favorite, and personally, I feel that slightly lowers the enjoyment that I could be having while playing. I guess on one hand, Hoyo wants us to pick our favorites by investing into them in terms of eidolons or rolling for their signature light cones, but on the other hand, I feel there's also a lot of room for them to add in other things as well. At the end of the day, the more attached a player is to a character, the more likely they'll be willing to invest in them, so if players can get cool stuff for their favorites, then that would only help Hoyo in the long term, at least in my eyes. Anyway, that's all my thoughts, and I appreciate you listening if you made it this far. If you have some thoughts of your own on this topic, I'd love to hear about it, so feel free to leave a comment down below, or join my Discord link in the description to talk with me about it. As usual, thank you so much for watching, subscribe, and if you haven't already, maybe give my other videos a shot too.